Pat Tillman, the Arizona Cardinals safety, was known for his fierce tackles.
Shoots it over the middle, and wow, what a hit! Pat Tillman knocked the helmet off of Isaac Byrd.
Unbridled spirit on the football field.
Here we go, baby, let's go. Okay, I'm just saying, initially we were at 6.
Right.
Rob, stay Rob.
And as the unflinching patriot who, driven by the events on 9/11, gave up his multi-million-dollar career to volunteer for military duty and died in Afghanistan.
Yet as much as Pat Tillman loved competing on the football field, he loved America even more.
He's become a symbol of all those American soldiers who have sacrificed their lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. But now, these letters to his wife Marie and his personal journal, seen publicly here for the first time, reveal that in the year leading to his death, he'd come to have serious doubts about the way America was fighting its war on terror.
My life at this point is relatively easy. My job is challenging, enjoyable, and strokes my vanity enough to fool me into thinking it's important.
Tillman's wife turned the journals over to John Krakauer, the best-selling author, who has written a book piecing together Tillman's tragic story.
Who does this? Who takes a perfectly perfect life and ruins it? A perfectly happy wife and marriage and jeopardizes it? Ah! If I do not strangle someone while I'm here, I was touched by an angel.
Tillman and Marie were married only a few days when he enlisted. By July 2002, married just 2 months, he was in boot camp.
As always, Marie is on my mind. I've been unable to speak with her since we've been here, and I miss the sound of her voice.
Pat and his brother Kevin enlisted together and served together in the elite Army Rangers. Their platoon mates remember them as inseparable.
They were the closest set of brothers I think I've ever seen.
Pat had joined the Army because he wanted to fight in Afghanistan to hunt for Osama bin Laden. But shortly after he completed Ranger School in 2003, the United States invaded Iraq.
Pat was extremely upset about this. He thought the war was illegal. He thought it was a mistake. He thought it was going to be a disaster. And you don't in the Army. You're not supposed to talk about that. You're not supposed to talk politics. And Pat didn't shut up. He told everyone who he encountered, this war is illegal as hell.
As it turned out, Pat's first mission was in Iraq, not Afghanistan.
If Kevin and I are part of a situation where we must fight, every bit of my soul knows we will fight as hard as anyone ever has. We will not question the reasons for our being here or allow any personal beliefs to interfere with our job. My hope is that decisions are being made with the same good faith that Kevin and I aim to display. I hope this war is about more than oil, money, and power. I doubt that it is.
Do you think later on he thought this is about oil?
Oh, there's no doubt. The more time the more time Pat spent in Iraq, the more and more he realized this whole thing was terrible.
But Pat Tillman was the most famous soldier in the Army at that time and very important to a Pentagon trying to maintain public support for the war.
Donald Rumsfeld was a guy who happened to notice when Pat enlisted. He sent him a personal letter and tried really hard to turn him into the poster boy. He was watching Tillman's every move from the moment he enlisted throughout they knew, when Pat Tillman coughed, they knew it.
Yet Pat shunned the limelight and refused to do any interviews once he joined the Army.
He didn't want any special treatment. He was content just being like everybody else. He didn't want to be glorified or put up on a pedestal. He just wanted to do what he believed in.
He was really smart about politics, and he knew that there was a really good chance that if he died, that administration would try to capitalize on it for their benefit, and he didn't want that to happen.
Pat's first mission turned out to be a high-profile rescue.
Pat and Kevin Tillman were part of the rescue for Jessica Lynch. They were involved in that. And as the Army was sending, 1,000 troops, they're organizing this incredible number of people to rescue her, Pat looked around and said, wait a minute, something's fishy here.
One day before her rescue, Pat expressed in his journal suspicions about the operation. He questioned why so many special forces were involved in it.
This mission will be a POW rescue, a woman named Jessica Lynch. I do believe this to be a big public relations stunt. Do not mistake me. I wish everyone in trouble to be rescued, but sending this many folks in for a single low-ranking soldier screams of media blitz. In any case, I'm glad to be able to do my part, and I hope we bring her home safe.
Of course, it turned out he was right. The operation had been a publicity stunt. Lynch was being treated at an Iraqi hospital, and her doctors had tried to turn her over to the Army in the days before the raid. Tillman feared that if something were to happen to him, he too would be used as propaganda, and he shared this with some of his platoon mates.
One night, Pat, kind of out of the blue, said, "You know, if I get killed over here, don't let them parade me to the street. That's something I hate to think about. I'm afraid if I die, you know, they're going to make me into this symbol and they're going to parade me through the street. You know, don't let that happen."
But by the spring of 2004, Pat was on his way to Afghanistan and on his way to die. By April 2004, Pat Tillman was finally in Afghanistan. It was where he wanted to be.
He'd become much more disillusioned about the Army by what he'd seen in Iraq. But he was going to fulfill his commitment, and he was looking forward to going to Afghanistan.
On April 22, 2004, while on mission in the mountains of Afghanistan near the Pakistan border, a Humvee broke down, and the platoon was ordered to split into two groups. Pat went with one, and his brother went with the other.
It's really sad. It's this tragic cascade of decisions.
I heard the gunfire, and then I saw the tracer rounds pouring out of the canyon.
Insurgents had attacked Kevin's group, and Pat's group raced to support them.
It was almost like a fireworks show, and my adrenaline just immediately spiked. And then once I got out of the vehicle, my squad leader, you know, he was like, "All right, this is it, calm down, you know, this is what we trained for." And I kind of, you know, came back to reality for a second. And then we charged up the hill.
Communications were down, and the men under fire, including Tillman's brother, had no idea their fellow Rangers were on the ridge trying to protect them.
The guys being ambushed came racing out, guns blazing.
And I remember him, he was trying to make contact, he was waving his arms and everything.
Pat and an Afghan soldier serving with him were killed by friendly fire.
I saw him slumped over. I saw O'Neill grab him and pull him back, and that's when I could tell he was hit. Couldn't see it great. No, honestly, I didn't really want to look at it. It's a lot of, I remember seeing a whole, this looked like a mist of red.
Kevin, who wasn't there when Pat was killed, he was at the end of the convoy. He got there later. He didn't know Pat was killed by friendly fire. Everyone else was told, "Don't tell Kevin." He was kept in the dark for a month.
The military told Pat's family he was killed by the Taliban. The Tillmans did not learn the truth until 5 weeks later.
I think it's wrong. I mean, you don't tell somebody a story that didn't happen to try and make them feel better. There's not a whole lot that's going to make them feel better at the time. You might as well just tell them the truth.
Pat's brother Kevin later went before Congress to talk about it.
Revealing that Pat's death was a fratricide would have been yet another political disaster, so the facts needed to be suppressed. An alternative narrative had to be constructed.
Krakauer's book reveals new information about Tillman's death, known until now only to the Army and his family. This video, never before aired, was taken by Army investigators in 2006. It shows the spot where Pat Tillman was killed.
Tillman was in the seizure location here.
Behind these boulders, where he was hiding from a rain of bullets. What shocked you by that investigation?
No one's asking the right questions. They're not asking any questions. There's nothing. They just drive through the canyon. We're done now. Cut.
They began at the north end of the valley.
You think when those read this book of yours, especially within the military, and certainly within the administration under President Bush, do you think they'll be able to say you've got the wrong story?
I think they'll raise objections. They certainly will. I mean, it's not a flattering portrait of Rumsfeld, Cheney especially. Some very senior members of the officer corps, generals, we're talking four-star generals, did not do the right thing with Pat Tillman. They did the wrong thing.
The general now running the entire operation in Afghanistan now, General McChrystal, you in your book talk about his role in all of this.
McChrystal is extremely quiet. He covers his tracks, he avoids publicity, but we do know that McChrystal was notified probably the night Pat was killed and certainly the next day.
We interviewed McChrystal in Afghanistan this past July. We asked him to answer a few questions about Tillman. He refused. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld also refused to be interviewed for this story.
Many American families have suffered the same terrible sacrifice that the Tillman family now suffers.
In a standard Army deployment form Pat filled out before he left for Iraq, he made it very clear he did not want the military to have any direct involvement with his funeral. Nevertheless, the military did.
If he was here right now and find out what happened, what do you think he would feel about the way that his funerals were treated?
He would be so angry. He would be so hurt and furious at what his families had to suffer at the hands of the Army and the government. I mean, he would want to come down and wring someone's neck, for sure.
For Nightline, I'm Bob Woodruff in New York.